The rain came down in endless gray sheets that Friday night, smearing the world outside the windshield into a watery blur. Lena wiped her palms against her jeans as she climbed the front steps of the two-story house, her backpack heavy with textbooks and snacks. The porch light buzzed faintly above her, flickering with each gust of wind. The couple who opened the door looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that sits deep in the bones. Mr. and Mrs. Carver smiled with polite urgency, coats already in hand. They moved around each other with the careful rhythm of people who had rehearsed this departure many times. Mrs. Carver's eyes lingered on Lena longer than her husband's. "The baby's already asleep," she said softly. "Please don't wake him, and don't go upstairs unless you need to." Lena nodded, pretending that last part didn't sound strange. "Got it. Have a good night." The door shut, the lock clicked, and the silence that followed was too complete. For a while, she tried to fill it with noise. A movie on low volume, the crunch of chips, the rhythmic tapping of rain against glass. The house was warm, but it carried that still, watchful feeling older homes sometimes had, like it was listening. Every creak of the floor made her glance up, waiting for another sound to answer it. On the coffee table sat the baby monitor, a small white unit with a blinking green light. The soft static became background noise, like breathing. She scrolled through her phone, half watching the movie, until she heard it. A voice. It wasn't loud. It was faint and muffled, slipping through the static like a whisper behind a wall. "Lena." She froze. The rain outside seemed to pause too, as if listening. She turned the monitor volume down, then up again. The whisper came clearer this time, fragile and deliberate. "Lena, turn around." Her chest tightened. She spun in her seat, nothing behind her. The living room lay empty, shadows pooling under the furniture. She let out a shaky laugh, trying to steady her heartbeat. "Probably interference," she muttered, though she wasn't sure from what. The nearest houses were far enough away that she could barely see their porch lights through the rain. She turned back to the monitor. The tiny screen flickered, static snow rolling across it. Then, for half a second, she saw it, movement, a shadow passing across the baby's crib. Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered, standing slowly. The whispering resumed, this time quieter but faster, like breath pressing against the microphone. She couldn't make out words now, just the rise and fall of something almost human. She grabbed her phone's flashlight and started toward the stairs. Each step groaned under her sneakers. The house felt colder the higher she climbed. Halfway up, the monitor in her hand hissed with static. Then silence. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the whisper. The hallway upstairs was dark, except for the faint blue glow leaking from the nursery door. It was slightly ajar, swaying with the draft. Lena's breath fogged in the air as she reached for it. She could hear something moving beyond it, slow, dragging, like fabric against wood. "Hello." Her voice cracked. "Mr. Carver?" No answer. The monitor flickered to life again. The video feed jittered between static and the crib empty. But in one frozen frame, she saw something. A dark outline beside the crib, tall, unmoving, featureless. Then it vanished. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She pushed the door open. The nursery light swung from side to side, throwing warped shadows across pastel walls. The crib was empty, just as the monitor had shown. The window was open, curtains billowing with the wind and rain. She ran to it, her shoes slipping on the wet floor. The yard below was empty, only the rustle of trees and the hiss of rain. Behind her, the baby monitor crackled again. It was still on the dresser, speaker hissing softly. Then faint laughter. A child's giggle, high and sweet, echoing through the static. "Lena." She turned toward the sound. The voice didn't come from the monitor this time. It came from the baby's closet. The door creaked open an inch, enough to reveal darkness thicker than the rest of the room. She stepped back, her throat tight, every instinct screaming to run. The giggle repeated, closer now, right at her ear. And yet, no one stood beside her. Something cold brushed against her wrist. She screamed and dropped the monitor. It hit the floor, the screen splintering, but for an instant before it died completely, the camera feed returned. A face, or what might have been one, loomed close to the lens, pale, distorted, its mouth too wide. Then darkness. Her phone rang suddenly, vibrating in her pocket like a living thing. She yanked it out, desperate for a voice. The caller ID made her stomach twist. Incoming call, nursery camera. She dropped the phone and stumbled backward, out of the nursery, down the stairs, nearly tripping over her bag. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts as she fumbled for the front door. The handle refused to turn. Behind her, the baby monitor clicked once more, a single chirp, then silence. When the Carvers returned 2 hours later, they found the front door wide open, rain pooling across the entryway. The monitor still sat on the coffee table, light blinking steadily. Upstairs, the crib was no longer empty. Inside, wrapped neatly in a blanket, lay Lena's phone. On its screen, a video still from the baby monitor. The crib, the same room. Only this time, a figure stood behind it, whispering something no one could hear. And then the feed cut to black. The countryside was quiet that night. Too quiet for comfort. Cam's old Honda rattled up the long gravel driveway, headlights cutting through the fog that clung to the trees like wet breath. The farmhouse at the end of the lane sat in darkness, its only light a faint orange glow from the upstairs window. He parked beside a rusted mailbox, slinging his jacket over his shoulder as he stepped out into the biting cold. Crickets chirped once, then fell silent when he slammed the car door. For a moment, he hesitated, taking in the eerie stillness. Babysitting out here always gave him the creeps. But Mrs. Greer paid well, and Cam needed the money. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and rain-soaked wood. The kids, Lily and Max, were already asleep upstairs, tucked in beneath handmade quilts. Mrs. Greer had left a note on the kitchen counter. TV's fine, snacks in the pantry. Back by midnight. He flipped on the living room lamp, the light spilling across old family portraits and lace curtains. The air felt thick, unmoving. Cam settled onto the couch, scrolling his phone, trying not to think about how far away everything was. No neighbors, no passing cars, just the wind sighing across the open fields. Around 10:30, the first tap came. A faint sound against the window behind him, light, rhythmic, almost polite. He ignored it at first, assuming it was a branch in the wind. But a few minutes later, another tap tap tap. Then silence. He looked over his shoulder. The curtains swayed gently from the draft. "It's just the wind," he muttered, mostly to fill the empty room with sound. Then came another tap, sharper this time, as if someone were testing the glass. Cam stood, phone light raised, and walked toward the window. Through the sheer curtain, he saw only his reflection. Pale face, dark hoodie, faint circles under his eyes. He sighed, brushing it off again. He turned to walk back to the couch, and froze. In the reflection of the glass, there was another shape behind him. A man, tall, standing just over his shoulder. Cam's body locked up, his breath caught in his throat. Slowly he turned, heart thundering. The room was empty. He spun back toward the window, pressing closer. The reflection now showed only himself again, alone, wide-eyed. His pulse pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself his mind was playing tricks. But the unease lingered, thick and heavy. He went around checking every door, every lock, even looked outside through the peephole. Nothing, just fog. He returned to the couch, forcing himself to relax. He put on a movie but couldn't focus. The farmhouse creaked and groaned with every gust of wind. The old floorboards seemed to shift under his feet like the house itself was breathing. Then, tap tap tap. The sound came again, from the same window. Louder, closer. Cam's hand trembled as he peeled back the curtain. Outside, the yard was a gray blur under the fog. The tree branches were still. No wind, no movement. But the glass was fogged from the outside, and written in the misty condensation were 3 small words. "Let me in." He stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The bulb burst, plunging the room into half-darkness. The only light came from the flickering TV, flashing faces across the wall. He ran to the phone on the counter. Deadline. He grabbed his cell, no signal. His heart pounded as he stared at the fogged-up window, the words slowly dripping down the glass. Then something smiled back at him. A pale face pressed against the window, too close, skin stretched thin over bone. The eyes were sunken, wet, unblinking. Its grin was impossibly wide, like it was straining to imitate what a human smile should look like. Cam fell backward, scrambling across the floor, knocking over a chair. When he looked again, the window was empty. The words had been wiped away. He stood, chest heaving, flashlight in hand, moving cautiously toward the glass. The reflection shimmered faintly, catching the TV's light. For a brief, trembling moment, he saw himself again, just himself. And then, as he leaned closer, the reflection smiled. Not his face, its face. His reflection moved before he did, lips curling, eyes hollow. Cam dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the floorboards, slicing through the shadows. He ran to the door, yanking it open, but a blast of freezing fog met him, so thick he couldn't see beyond the porch. He shouted into the darkness, "Who's out there?" No reply, only the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps circling the house. He slammed the door shut and pressed his back against it. The footsteps stopped right outside. A long silence followed. Then a single tap on the window. Then another, and another. The sound multiplied, spreading around the house. Windows on all sides, tapping in an eerie, perfect rhythm, like dozens of hands drumming to the same invisible beat. Cam dropped to the floor, covering his ears, whispering, "Stop, please stop." But the tapping only grew louder, angrier, faster, until it stopped all at once. The quiet that followed was worse than the noise. The house felt empty again. Slowly, he rose, shaking, and peered through the curtain one last time. The fog had cleared. The field was silent. The window glass, spotless. He exhaled shakily and turned toward the hallway, and froze. His reflection still stood in the window behind him, smiling. When Mrs. Greer returned just after midnight, she found Cam's car still parked outside, engine cold, door open. Inside the house, the lights were off. The living room window had a single handprint on the inside, pressed so hard the outline of the fingertips had cracked the glass. And written just beneath it, in the faintest fog, were the same three words, "Let me in." The old Victorian house loomed like a memory from another time. Tall, narrow, its paint peeling in soft curls, its windows cloudy with age. Maya pulled into the driveway, headlights washing over a yard scattered with dead leaves and overgrown shrubs. She had answered the babysitting ad last week, drawn by the generous pay. Quiet night, one child, easy money. That's what she told herself. The mother, Mrs. Ellison, greeted her with the tired smile of someone who'd forgotten how to rest. "He's already asleep," she said, her voice low and even. "His name is Noah. Everything you need is written on the counter. Just don't worry about the basement. The door sometimes creaks open by itself, but it's nothing." Maya nodded, pretending not to notice the way Mrs. Ellison avoided looking at the stairs that led down there. After they left, the silence in the house pressed against her like water. It wasn't the ordinary kind of quiet, it was a held breath kind. The floorboards creaked as if the house shifted in its sleep. She made herself comfortable on the couch, homework spread across her lap, a cup of tea cooling beside her. The grandfather clock ticked unevenly from the corner, counting time that seemed slower than usual. Upstairs, Noah's nightlight glowed faintly under his door. Then came the sound, soft, distant, and wrong. First, she thought it was the pipes. A faint whimpering sound, like air struggling through narrow spaces. But it came again, clearer this time, cutting through the silence. A crying voice. A child's. Her heart skipped. She stared at the ceiling. No, it wasn't from above. It was from below. From the basement. She stood, listening. The sobbing came again, longer now, punctuated by tiny gasps. "Help, please!" Her throat went dry. She turned toward the hallway where the basement door waited in shadow. The sound was faint but unmistakable. A child's voice. A child crying for help. Her first thought was Noah. Maybe he'd wandered downstairs somehow? But when she checked his room, the boy lay peacefully asleep, small hands clutching a stuffed bear. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. The crying didn't stop. It echoed faintly through the house now, like it was calling her name, though not in words. Just that tone, that desperate edge that clawed under her skin. Maya grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam trembled as she walked back to the hall. The basement door loomed there, slightly ajar, the darkness beneath it dense and unwelcoming. She whispered to herself, "It's probably just the house, maybe an animal." But she knew that wasn't true. She pulled the door open. The smell hit her first. Old dust, damp wood, something faintly metallic. The staircase descended into shadow, the wooden steps slick with age. The crying continued, somewhere far below, small and uneven. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice quivering. "Who's down there?" No answer, just the sound of breathing. Not hers. Deep, slow, wet breathing. She hesitated, hand gripping the railing, pulse pounding in her ears. The basement light was a dangling bulb with a pull cord at the bottom. She'd have to go halfway down before she could reach it. Every instinct screamed to shut the door and walk away. But the voice, the crying, turned into something softer now, more pleading. "Help me!" Maya stepped down. One stair, then another. Each groaned beneath her weight, echoing into the hollow dark. The air grew colder, heavier, until it felt like she was breathing through cloth. Halfway down, her phone flashlight flickered. The shadows seemed to move below her, shapes bending in ways they shouldn't. The crying had stopped. Now there was only whispering. Not words, just a murmur of something pressed against the other side of silence. She tried to call out again, but her voice broke. When she reached the bottom step, the bulb above her swayed gently, though there was no wind. The faint swinging motion cast long, warped shadows across the cement floor. Her flashlight caught something near the far wall. A door. Smaller than usual, almost hidden behind old boxes. Wooden, nailed shut, with fresh scratches along the edges. The whispers came from behind it. Her hand trembled as she reached out. The wood was cold, damp, almost pulsing with quiet vibration. She pressed her ear against it and froze. A child's voice, clear as glass, whispered, "Please, let me out." Her whole body went rigid. She stumbled back, phone shaking. "Who are you?" No answer. Then, a sharp thud from behind the door. Another. Then the sound of tiny fingernails scraping wood. "Help me?" The voice begged again, this time cracked with tears. Maya looked around frantically, searching for a tool, a switch, anything. She saw a hammer lying on a workbench. She snatched it, breathing hard, and returned to the door. One nail, then another. The hammer's echo bounced up the stairs like gunshots. The air seemed to tighten with each swing. As she pried loose the last nail, the whisper stopped. Silence. She leaned closer, trying to hear. Her breath fogged the air. Then, without warning, a small hand shot out from the gap beneath the door, pale and thin, fingers clutching her ankle. Maya screamed, wrenching free, stumbling backward. The door rattled violently, something slamming from the other side. The bulb above flickered faster, shadows strobing across the room. The whispering turned into a low, inhuman moan that rose in pitch until it became a shriek. She dropped the hammer and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind her. She pressed her back against it, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. The house was silent again. Completely, terribly silent. Her phone screen glowed with a notification. Her trembling thumb opened it automatically, the baby monitor app. The live camera feed of Noah's room. The boy still slept peacefully. But in the corner of the frame, barely visible in the dim light, stood a small figure, facing the camera, motionless, and in its tiny hand the same hammer she'd dropped in the basement. Maya's breath stopped. The feed froze for a moment, then glitched. When the image returned, the crib was empty. And the soft, muffled crying began again, from behind the basement door. The night air was calm and heavy, filled with the soft ticking of an old wall clock and the faint hum of a desk lamp. Zoe sat at the kitchen table, her sketchbook open, mechanical pencil dancing across the paper. Babysitting was usually her quiet escape. A few hours to study, draw, and get paid. The little girl she watched tonight, Mira, was sweet but shy, speaking only in half-whispers and keeping her eyes on her drawings like the world outside them didn't exist. "Do you like to draw?" Mira asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was small, but it carried perfectly in the still house. Zoe smiled, looking over. "Yeah, I do. You're pretty good yourself." Myra's crayon scratched across a new page. "I'm drawing my friend." Zoe leaned forward, curious. The picture showed a stick figure, tall, black, featureless, standing beside a small girl with brown hair and a yellow dress. Myra's hand trembled slightly as she colored in the space around them, filling the background with the long, twisting lines of a hallway. "Who's your friend?" Zoe asked gently. Mira didn't look up. "The man in the hallway," she said simply, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Zoe laughed softly. "Oh yeah? Does he live here?" The little girl nodded. "He watches over me." A tiny chill crawled up Zoe's spine. She pushed it away with another smile. "Well, that's nice of him. I'm sure he's friendly." But Mira didn't answer. She had started another drawing. Faster this time, her crayon movements jerky, almost frantic. When she finished, she slid the paper toward Zoe. Now the stick figure had hands, long, crooked fingers stretching toward the girl. Zoe frowned. "You've got quite an imagination." Mira shrugged, yawning. "He doesn't like when I draw him wrong." It was almost bedtime, and Zoe didn't want to push further. "Okay, kiddo, let's get you to bed." She tucked Mira in, turned on the nightlight, and left the door open just a crack. The drawings lay scattered across the table downstairs, but Zoe didn't want to look at them anymore. Something about those empty black eyes, or lack of eyes, unsettled her. An hour later, she sat on the couch scrolling her phone, the TV playing softly in the background. When she glanced up at the table, the top drawing was gone. She blinked, confused. Maybe she'd moved it earlier? She checked the floor under the table, nothing. She gathered the papers to stack them neatly, but froze. A new sketch had appeared among them. She hadn't drawn it. It wasn't there before. It showed the same stick figure, only now the hallway behind him looked like this house. The pattern on the rug, the mirror by the front door, the lamp in the corner. Zoe's mouth went dry. She looked toward the hallway, suddenly aware of how dark it was past the edge of the lamplight. The air felt still, heavy, like something unseen was waiting for her to notice it. "Mira?" she called softly. "Did you come back downstairs?" No answer, just the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Another paper slid off the table. The sound was so small, so delicate. She almost convinced herself it was just the draft from the open window. She knelt to pick it up, and froze again. It was another drawing. This one was closer. The stick figure filled most of the page now, its shape no longer just lines. The head was rounder, almost human, though still void of features. The hands were stretched forward, fingers sharp, reaching toward something out of frame. Her heart thudded. She picked up the first drawing again and laid them side by side. The progression was clear. The figure was moving closer with each one. Zoe looked around the room, nothing. The air conditioning kicked on, making her flinch. She turned on the overhead light, flooding the room in pale yellow. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Avery, Myra's mom. "Everything okay?" Zoe typed quickly, "All good. Just putting Mira to bed again soon." She paused, then added, "Do you know anything about the drawings she does?" No reply. The message stayed on delivered. She glanced back at the table, and her stomach dropped. The drawings were gone. Every single one. The table was empty. She backed away slowly, her breath uneven. Then she noticed something on the wall near the hallway entrance. A single paper, taped at eye level. Her hand shook as she approached it. The drawing showed the same tall figure standing beside a smaller one, but this time the smaller one wasn't Mira. It was her. The curly hair, the hoodie, the phone in hand, all drawn in a shaky child's scrawl. Zoe tore the drawing from the wall, crumpling it in her hand. "Okay, this isn't funny," she whispered, though her voice barely rose above a tremor. She turned toward the hallway. The light there was dim, shadows stretching long across the floorboards. "Mira?" she called again, louder now. A soft thud came from upstairs. Then another. Footsteps, small, uneven, like someone pacing. "Mira, honey, stay in bed. Okay?" No response. Just silence. She took one step toward the stairs and then another. The wooden steps creaked as she climbed. The night light from Myra's room glowed faintly at the end of the hall. The door was half open. She pushed it slowly, the hinges groaning. The bed was empty. Sheets tossed aside. The window shut tight. "Mira?" Something rustled behind her. Zoe turned sharply and saw a single sheet of paper lying in the doorway. Her pulse spiked as she bent to pick it up. It was drawn in thick, dark crayon. The hallway again. The same hallway she was standing in. The stick figure was closer than ever, long arms stretching through the doorway. She looked up and the hallway light flickered. The shadows warped. For a split second, she thought she saw something tall at the end of the corridor. No face, just shape, just stillness. Her phone vibrated again. One new text. From Mrs. Avery. "We're still out of town." What drawings? Mira hasn't drawn anything since the accident. Zoe's breath caught. She looked back down at the paper in her hand and felt her chest seize. A fresh drawing was taped to the back of it, the crayon still warm, edges smudged with fingerprints. It showed the front door of the house, and written beneath it, in shaky black letters, were 3 words, "See you soon." At that exact moment, there came a gentle knock at the front door downstairs. Once, twice, then silence. Rain drummed steadily against the wide living room windows, turning the world outside into a curtain of distorted reflections. The rhythmic patter filled the air as Dylan, a 19-year-old college student, sat on the couch with a bowl of popcorn in his lap, watching a grainy baby monitor feed on the coffee table. Babysitting for the Carters was usually easy money, one toddler, asleep by 8 p.m. Parents home by midnight. But tonight, something felt different. The storm outside wasn't just rain. It was restless. The baby monitor's soft static hum was the only thing competing with the thunder. Every now and then, the small screen would flicker, showing the dimly lit nursery where Eli, the baby, slept in his crib. Dylan leaned back, scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing at the feed, the steady breathing of the baby comforting him in the background. A flash of lightning filled the room, bleaching everything white for an instant. Dylan blinked, glanced at the monitor, and froze. For a split second, the feed had shown something else. A figure, tall, still, standing in the corner of the nursery, right behind the crib. He squinted at the screen, his heart pounding in his throat. But when the static cleared, the corner was empty again. Eli lay perfectly still, sleeping soundly. "Jesus," he muttered, shaking his head. "I need more sleep." He turned the volume up slightly. The gentle hiss of the monitor filled the silence. A lullaby played faintly through the baby's nightlight projector upstairs. A soft, tinkling melody that should have been soothing. But now it just felt off, too slow, slightly warped like an old cassette tape. Thunder cracked again, shaking the window panes. The lights flickered. Dylan set his phone down and leaned forward, eyes fixed on the monitor. The camera feed glitched again, vertical lines cutting through the image. Then, through the static came the faintest whisper. At first, he thought it was interference. But then, the whisper formed a word. "Lon." He froze. The sound was soft, childlike, and distorted, like someone speaking through layers of static and distance. Dylan leaned closer, trying to make out the noise. The whisper came again, a little clearer. "Don't let him in." His breath caught. He stared at the monitor, heart hammering. The camera panned slightly, even though it wasn't motion activated. The crib was empty. He stood up so fast the popcorn spilled across the floor. "Eli?" he called, voice shaking. No answer. Only the lullaby, slowing, warping further, its notes crawling through the air like something dying. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and started up the stairs 2 at a time. The power flickered again, shadows pulsing against the walls. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered, the thunder muffled now, as though the sound was being swallowed. When he reached the nursery, the door was already slightly ajar. He pushed it open with trembling fingers. The room was dark except for the projector light, spinning soft stars across the ceiling. The crib was empty, the sheets rumpled. "Eli?" His voice cracked. "Buddy, where are you?" A soft giggle answered him from behind the door. He spun around, nothing there. He took a cautious step forward. "Eli?" The baby monitor on the dresser suddenly came to life. A burst of static, then heavy breathing. But it wasn't coming from him. The sound was behind him. Dylan turned slowly. Someone or something was standing in the corner of the room. The same corner from the feed. The figure was tall, hunched slightly, the edges of its body seeming to blur in the dim light. Its face, if it had one, was lost in the darkness. For a split second, Dylan couldn't tell if it was real or just the shadow of the rocking chair. Then it moved. He stumbled backward, slamming into the crib. The monitor screeched, the feed flashing to pure white noise. "Hey!" he shouted, grabbing the flashlight and aiming it toward the corner, but it was empty again. His chest heaved as he scanned the room. Eli's stuffed rabbit lay in the middle of the floor, upright, facing the door. Dylan picked it up with shaking hands. Then click. The door shut behind him. He spun, flashlight trembling. "Okay, this isn't funny." A sharp crack of static filled the air. The monitor light blinked red. Then a voice, distorted and low, bled through again. "Downstairs." He ran. The hallway seemed narrower, darker. Each step echoed too loudly. When he reached the living room, the monitor on the table had turned back on by itself. But the image it showed wasn't the nursery anymore. It was the living room, the exact angle of the couch, the coffee table, the front door, and him standing there staring at the feed. He looked around wildly. There was no other camera, no reflection, no sign of anyone else in the house. The monitor crackled again, the whisper deepening. "He's inside." The feed zoomed in, pixel by pixel, until Dylan could see the reflection of himself in the monitor's black border. But just behind him, in that reflection, a faint shape was forming. A silhouette. Slowly he turned his head. Nothing. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks at the front door. He stood frozen, chest heaving. Rain blurred the window behind him, and the lights flickered again. He took a single step toward the door. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the storm. Then knock, knock, knock. Louder. Closer. He inched closer, hand shaking as it reached for the doorknob. The baby monitor crackled one last time. The whisper came through, soft as breath. "Don't open it." But it was too late. The door creaked open on its own, slow and deliberate. The monitor fell silent. When the Carters returned 2 hours later, the front door was open. Rainwater pooled on the floor. The baby was sleeping soundly in his crib, alone. The monitor sat on the table, still on, showing a live feed of the empty living room. Every few seconds, through the static, a faint whisper repeated the same words over and over. "Don't let him in." The house phone rang at exactly 12:03 a.m. It startled Rachel, who had just started to doze off on the couch. The flickering glow of a horror movie played quietly on the TV, something she'd put on to drown out the creaks and hums of the unfamiliar house. Babysitting for the Hendersons wasn't new, but tonight felt heavier, like the air itself was waiting for something. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. The baby monitor on the coffee table buzzed softly, its green light blinking steadily. The house phone rang again, loud, sharp, slicing through the silence. Rachel frowned. No one had called since the Hendersons left, and they'd said they'd be home after midnight. Maybe they were checking in? She answered. Hello. A pause. Then faint breathing. Mr. Henderson? She asked, sitting up straighter. The line crackled, the breathing growing louder. Then, a voice, soft, rasping, and unfamiliar, whispered. You shouldn't have answered. Rachel froze. The voice was male, calm, deliberate. Who is this? She demanded, trying to sound firm. No response, just the steady rhythm of breathing. She hung up, her hand trembling slightly. Probably a prank, she muttered, forcing a nervous laugh. She checked the baby monitor. The toddler, Ben, was still sleeping peacefully upstairs, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. She turned the volume up slightly, the soft sound of his breathing filling the room. 5 minutes passed. Then the phone rang again. Her stomach dropped. The exact same ring, long, shrill, insistent. She hesitated, her pulse quickening. Then she picked up. Listen, whoever this is. The same voice interrupted her. He's awake now. Rachel's grip on the phone tightened. Who? Silence. Then, in the distance, from the baby monitor came a soft, muffled thud. She turned toward it instantly, heart pounding. The camera feed flickered, then cleared, showing Ben's crib. He wasn't moving. Ben? She whispered, watching the monitor. The camera's audio picked up faint movement, a soft scrape, like footsteps on carpet. Then, barely audible, a small voice. Mommy? Rachel bolted upright, phone still in her hand. Ben? Sweetie, it's okay. I'm coming. She set the phone down and hurried up the stairs, her socks sliding slightly on the hardwood floor. The hallway light flickered as she passed. The house was too quiet. No creaks, no hums, no wind. Just the distant rain tapping at the windows. She reached the nursery door and pushed it open slowly. The night light glowed in the corner, casting faint shadows across the walls. Ben was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring toward the open closet. Rachel rushed over. Hey, it's okay, honey. Bad dream? He didn't blink, didn't look at her. Ben. He pointed one tiny finger toward the darkness of the closet. The man's inside. Her stomach dropped. She turned slowly toward the open door, but saw nothing. Just shadows, hanging clothes, and the faint smell of cedar. She exhaled shakily. Nobody's in there, sweetheart. See? She stood and stepped closer, forcing herself to pull the chain light. The bulb flickered to life. Empty. When she turned back around, Ben had already laid down again, eyes half closed. See? Just your clothes, she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. Try to sleep, okay? She turned off the closet light and walked out, closing the door behind her. As she reached the hallway, the phone downstairs rang again. Her pulse raced. She ran down to answer, snatching it up before the third ring. Who is this? The same voice came through, calm, distant. You should check the closet again. Her hand went cold. If you're trying to scare me. But the line went dead. She stared at the receiver for a long moment, her mind racing. Then she grabbed her phone and dialed Mrs. Henderson's number. No answer. She dialed again, straight to voicemail. Rachel chewed her lip, pacing. The baby monitor flickered once, then again static, then a brief image of the empty nursery. But something was off. The closet door was open. She froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward the real hallway upstairs. The faint creak of a hinge reached her ears, distant, slow, deliberate. Her breath caught. Ben? She whispered, sprinting toward the stairs. The air felt heavy, thick with static. Each step groaned under her weight. She reached the nursery again and flicked on the light. The crib was empty. Her throat tightened. Ben! The closet stood wide open. Inside, nothing but shadows. She grabbed the baby monitor camera, pointing it toward the hallway. Ben! Come on, this isn't funny. She stepped into the hall, eyes scanning frantically. A faint laugh echoed from downstairs. Not a child's laugh, but something deeper, rougher. She ran toward the sound, her heart slamming against her ribs. Ben! The living room light flickered once, then went out completely. The only glow came from the baby monitor she was holding, its small screen casting ghostly light on her trembling hands. The feed showed the living room perfectly still. Then, slowly, the camera angle shifted. It was as if someone else was holding another monitor, somewhere behind her, recording her every move. The faint voice came again through the static, whispering directly into her ear. "He's behind you." Rachel spun, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. But nothing. Then the front door creaked open on its own. Wind and rain burst in, scattering papers across the floor. Rachel ran forward, shouting into the night. "Ben! Ben!" Lightning illuminated the yard, for just a heartbeat. A small figure stood by the edge of the driveway, holding a stuffed dinosaur. "Ben!" she screamed, running outside. But as she reached him, the next flash of lightning hit, and the figure vanished. The stuffed dinosaur lay in the mud, still warm. When the Hendersons returned an hour later, they found the front door open, the phone off the hook, and the monitor feed still buzzing softly. It showed the nursery, empty crib, open closet. And written on the inside wall, in what looked like crayon, were 3 crooked words. He called again. The wind howled outside, making the old birchwood house creak and groan like a living thing. Maya, 17, sat curled up on the worn couch, her laptop open, pretending to study while keeping one ear tuned to the baby monitor beside her. The flickering fireplace threw soft light across the room, and the faint laughter of little Olive, age 6, drifted from the playroom upstairs. It had been an easy evening so far. A few games, a bedtime story, and a warm cup of tea. Maya liked this job. The Grant family was kind, and Olive was imaginative, the sort of child who talked to her dolls as if they could truly talk back. But as the night wore on, that same imagination had begun to feel different. She'd tucked Olive in an hour ago, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. But every few minutes, she could hear faint murmurs from the monitor, whispers, giggles like the child was still playing with someone. First, Maya smiled. "Talking to your toys again, huh?" she muttered softly. But as the clock struck midnight, the laughter stopped. The monitor went silent, too silent. She leaned closer, tapping the device. The static hissed faintly, then a new sound emerged. Tap, tap, tap. Maya froze. The noise wasn't coming from the monitor anymore. It was coming from beneath her, from under the stairs that led to the basement. Her breath hitched. She muted the TV, and the entire house fell still except for the rhythmic tapping. It sounded deliberate, slow, like someone drumming their fingers against wood from below. "Probably a pipe," she whispered, though the words felt empty. She stood, her legs shaking slightly, and crossed the creaky floorboards toward the basement door. The tapping stopped. She reached for the doorknob, and then, faintly, the baby monitor crackled again. Olive's voice drifted through, sleepy and quiet. "Maya." Relief washed over her. "Hey, sweetheart, you should be asleep," she said softly into the mic. Olive's voice came again, almost a whisper. "There's someone under my bed." Maya's heart lurched. "What?" "He's whispering," Olive continued, her voice trembling. "He said he lives under the stairs." Maya's pulse began to race. She grabbed the flashlight from the counter and hurried up the stairs 2 at a time, her breath shallow. "It's okay, baby. I'm coming right now." The hallway light flickered as she approached Olive's room. When she pushed the door open, Olive was sitting upright in bed, her eyes wide, clutching her blanket to her chest. Hey, Maya whispered, forcing calm into her voice. "You're okay. See? There's no one here." Olive pointed to the floor. "He went down." Maya glanced beneath the bed. Only toys, a stray sock, dust. Nothing unusual. She smiled shakily. "See? No monsters tonight." Olive didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on the open bedroom door. "He's watching us," she whispered. Maya turned toward the doorway, nothing there. Just the dim glow from the hall light, stretching shadows along the walls. "All right, I'm gonna go check downstairs." "Okay?" she said softly. Lock your eyes on your stuffed bunny and don't move until I come back. Olive nodded silently. Maya stepped out into the hallway, the floorboards groaning beneath her. She reached the top of the basement stairs again. Every sound in the house now sharp. The ticking of the clock, the wind pressing against the windows, her own heartbeat. She shined the flashlight down the steps. The beam sliced through the dark, catching floating dust. The basement stretched below, cold and quiet. She took one step down, then another. Halfway down, the light flickered, and the tapping started again. This time, it was closer. Maya froze, holding her breath. Hello! Silence. Then softly, tap, 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 directly beneath the stairs. She crouched, heart hammering, shining the flashlight between the gaps of the steps. For a split second, she saw something. A face, pale, half-hidden in shadow. Two eyes staring back up at her. Maya screamed and stumbled backward, slamming the basement door shut. She leaned against it, her entire body trembling. The tapping had stopped again, but her reflection in the glass cabinet beside the stairs seemed wrong. In the reflection, the basement door was open. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she turned her head toward the real door. It was still shut, locked. The reflection showed it swinging wider, and behind it a movement. Maya! She spun around. Olive was standing at the top of the stairs, her hair tousled, eyes half closed like she was sleepwalking. Sweetheart, stay there, Maya hissed, but Olive stepped down, one small foot after another. Maya rushed forward and caught her by the arm. Don't! The baby monitor in her pocket came alive with static. Then a deep, distorted voice whispered through. Let her come down. Maya froze, gripping Olive tightly. Who are you? She shouted, though her voice broke halfway. The static grew louder, turning into a shrill whine. Olive flinched, burying her face into Maya's shoulder. Maya backed away from the basement door, clutching the girl close. It's okay, baby. We're going outside. She turned toward the front door, but something caught her eye. The rug by the entryway was slightly lifted, as though something beneath it had been pushed upward. She hesitated, flashlight trembling. Slowly, she knelt and lifted the edge. A small wooden panel, a hidden hatch. Her heart pounded. What the hell? The panel creaked as she pulled it up. Cold air wafted out. Damp, musty, old. Beneath it, a narrow tunnel descended into darkness, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Olive whimpered softly. That's where he lives. Maya's flashlight flickered once and then died. For a moment, there was only the sound of wind and the faint hum of the baby monitor. Then, from deep below the floor, came a whisper that didn't belong to either of them. Maya! The hatch slammed shut. When the Grants returned the next morning, the living room looked untouched, except for the basement door, which now hung wide open. The baby monitor lay on the stairs, its green light blinking weakly. From its tiny speaker came the soft sound of tapping, slow, steady, rhythmic, echoing faintly from somewhere under the floorboards. The house on Maple Hollow Road was supposed to be just another easy babysitting gig. Evan, 21, was filling in for his cousin who usually watched little Sophie, a quiet 8-year-old girl with big brown eyes and an unnerving stillness about her. The Wilkes family's home was old, sprawling, and full of creaks, every sound amplified by the storm that rolled outside. From the start, something about the place felt off. The layout didn't make sense. Hallways that seemed to lead nowhere, doors that opened into walls. But Evan wasn't the superstitious type. He told himself it was just an old house, built weirdly, full of drafts and echoes. Sophie had gone to bed around 9. Easy job, he thought. He poured himself a soda, scrolled through his phone, and tried to ignore how the grandfather clock in the corner ticked just a second too slow. Then, from upstairs, he heard it. A faint dragging sound. He froze. It wasn't the soft footsteps of a child. It was heavier, longer, like something being pulled. Probably the cat, he muttered, though he hadn't seen one. He checked the baby monitor, static. The camera in Sophie's room had gone dark. Great, he sighed, setting down his drink. He grabbed the flashlight from the counter and started up the stairs, each step groaning under his weight. When he reached the top, the hallway stretched endlessly, shadows swallowing the far end. The air was colder up here, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. He reached Sophie's door and pushed it open. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wide awake, staring at the wall. "Hey!" he said softly. "Couldn't sleep?" Sophie didn't look at him. "They're moving the furniture again." Evan blinked. "Who's they?" She turned slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The people in the other room." He frowned. "Other room?" She nodded, pointing at the far wall. "Behind there." Evan followed her gaze. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, the faint outline of what might have once been a door visible under the pattern. He tapped it lightly, solid wood behind plaster. "There's no room back there, Sophie. Just the wall." Her voice was trembling now. "I can hear them whisper." He crouched beside her, brushing her hair gently. "Hey, it's just the storm, okay? Houses like this make weird noises when it rains." But when he listened closely, he did hear something. Faint, muffled, rhythmic. Thump, a pause, thump, like someone knocking softly from inside the wall. His heart gave a small jolt. He forced a shaky laugh. "Okay, that's creepy. I'll admit, probably pipes." He stood up and ran his hand along the wall again. But this time, his fingers brushed over a small seam near the baseboard. Hidden under layers of old paint was a thin outline, a narrow doorframe sealed shut. Sophie whispered behind him, "It wasn't there last night." Evan felt a chill creep up his neck. "Go back to bed. Okay? I'll check it out." She shook her head, clutching her blanket tighter. "They don't like when you open it." He tried to smile reassuringly, but his hands were already shaking as he pressed against the hidden panel. To his surprise, it shifted just slightly, but enough to show it wasn't part of the wall at all. A small, square door, about 4 feet high, creaked open with a dusty groan. The smell hit him first, old, damp, like wet earth and forgotten things. He shone his flashlight inside. A narrow crawl space stretched back into darkness, lined with rotting wood. Dust motes floated in the beam of light like tiny ghosts. And there, at the far end, stood a small wooden chair. On it sat a doll. Its porcelain face was cracked, one glass eye missing, its little hands folded neatly in its lap. Sophie whimpered. "She sits there every night." Evan swallowed hard. "You've seen this before?" Sophie nodded. "Sometimes she talks. She says she misses her family." Evan's laugh was nervous now, forced. "Okay, that's enough scary stories for tonight." He reached forward and shut the panel, clicking the latch back into place. "See? All gone." But when he turned around, Sophie was already back in bed, her eyes closed tight as if pretending to sleep. He sighed, walked out, and headed downstairs. 10 minutes later, the house power flickered, plunging everything into near darkness. He grabbed his phone for light and froze. From upstairs, faint and slow, came the creak of the hidden door opening again. Evan's chest tightened. "No," he whispered. "It's just wind." The monitor on the coffee table flickered to life. The feed showed Sophie's room, the empty bed, the wall, and the open crawlspace door. His flashlight shook in his hand as he climbed the stairs again. When he reached her room, the bed was empty. The blankets were crumpled on the floor. "Sophie," the crawlspace gaped open like a mouth. He aimed his flashlight into the darkness. The chair was empty. The doll was gone. He crouched down, shining the light deeper. At first, he saw nothing, just darkness and cobwebs. Then something moved. A hand, small, pale, pulling back into the shadows. He reached forward instinctively. "Sophie, come out of there right now." The light flickered. The air turned icy cold. Then, from inside the crawlspace, a child's voice, but not Sophie's, whispered softly, "She's already home." Evan stumbled back, heart hammering. He grabbed his phone, fumbling to call 911, but the signal was dead. The baby monitor screeched with static again. Then, faintly, a voice came through. "Don't close the door." He turned, but before he could move, The crawlspace door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The room plunged into silence. He lunged forward, yanking at the latch, but it wouldn't budge. From inside, something scraped against the wood. Nails, dragging slowly, rhythmically, like someone tracing letters from the other side. Evan stumbled back, shaking. He stared at the door, at the faint outline of a message now appearing through the dust. Spelled out one word. Stay. When the Wilkes family returned in the morning, they found the babysitter's flashlight lying by the nursery door, still on. The crawlspace panel was sealed tight again, as if it had never been opened. Sophie was asleep in her bed, breathing softly. And on the wall beside her, drawn in thin lines of dust, were two sets of small handprints, one hers, the other much older. It was close to 3 a.m. when Clara Jennings, a long-haul truck driver with 10 years on the road, pulled into Hollow Creek rest stop off Highway 19. The fog that night was thick, unnaturally thick, curling around her headlights like pale smoke. Her eyelids were heavy, her coffee long gone cold, and her logbook said she needed a break before sunrise. The place looked ordinary enough at first. A flickering neon sign that read, 2 pumps, and a diner glowing dimly in the mist. But something about it felt wrong. Maybe it was how quiet it was. Not even the hum of insects or the rumble of passing cars. She parked her rig, cut the engine, and climbed down. The air was still, cold, and heavy with the faint smell of diesel and wet asphalt. Inside the diner, an old jukebox stood in the corner, playing some tune that crackled through the speakers like a voice from another time. A waitress stood behind the counter, her smile polite but vacant. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," Clara said, sliding onto a stool. "Been a long haul from Baton Rouge." The waitress nodded, poured the coffee, and pushed it toward her. "Sugar's in the jar. Cream's gone bad." Clara smiled faintly. "Don't need it." She took a sip. The coffee was lukewarm, metallic, but she didn't care. It was something to keep her awake. As she drank, she glanced around. A few other customers sat scattered about the diner. A man in a flannel shirt staring blankly into his cup, a young woman humming quietly to herself, and a trucker at the far booth with his head bowed like he was sleeping. But none of them moved much. They just existed. "You get a lot of traffic through here?" Clara asked. The waitress didn't look up. "Only at night." Something in her tone made Clara's stomach twist. She laughed nervously. "Guess I'm in good company, huh?" The waitress finally met her eyes, and there was something hollow about them. "No one stops here twice." Clara froze. "What do you mean?" Before the waitress could answer, the jukebox stuttered, the music warping into static before cutting off completely. The lights flickered, and then, in that momentary darkness, Clara heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The sound of her truck engine starting up. Her heart dropped. "What the?" She rushed outside, the bell above the diner door jingling wildly behind her. Through the fog, she could barely make out the outline of her semi, its headlights glowing dimly. But then, the cab door slammed shut on its own. "Hey!" she shouted, running toward it. "Who's in there?" The engine revved once. A low, guttural growl, and then the entire truck began rolling backward, tires crunching over the gravel. Clara sprinted after it, but the fog was thick, swallowing the sound, swallowing the light. By the time she reached the edge of the lot, the truck was gone. Vanished. She spun around, disoriented, heart hammering. The diner loomed behind her, its neon sign now flickering wildly, the letters glitching before finally dying out. She stumbled back inside, gasping. The place was empty. No waitress. No customers. The jukebox stood silent, the booths covered in dust. A thick layer of cobwebs hung from the ceiling fans. Clara's hands trembled as she whispered, "No, I was just here." But the air smelled different now, stale, like a place that hadn't been touched in years. She looked down at the counter where she'd been sitting, and froze. There was a coffee cup there, her lipstick mark still fresh on the rim. But the coffee inside was cold, thick, almost black like sludge. She turned to leave, but the front door was gone. In its place was a solid wall, old wallpaper peeling at the seams. She backed up, her breath quick and shallow. No, no, no. Then, faintly, from behind the counter, came the sound of a bell ringing. A small service bell, ding, ding, ding. Slowly, Clara turned. The waitress was standing there again. But her uniform was torn, her hair matted, her skin pale and gray. You can't leave, she said softly. Clara's voice broke. What is this place? The waitress tilted her head, eyes black as oil. It's a stop between where you were and where you're going. Before Clara could move, the fog rolled in through the cracks of the diner, thick, suffocating, pressing against her skin. The lights flickered once more. When they came back on, the diner was empty again. No Clara, no movement, just the faint hiss of the coffee pot still dripping onto the counter. Hours later, a state trooper pulled off Highway 19 to investigate reports of an abandoned semi blocking the road. The cab door hung open. The keys were still in the ignition, the radio softly playing a broken tune. Inside the glove compartment, her logbook was open to the last entry. It read, 3:07 a.m. Stopped at Hollow Creek Rest. Place seems quiet. Need coffee before I move on. Below that, one more line had been scrawled hastily, the pen marks jagged and uneven. Don't stop here. The officer looked around the fog-covered road, frowning. There was no diner, no rest stop, just empty fields and silence stretching for miles. It was nearly midnight when Sophie Leland, a 21-year-old college student, parked her car outside the quiet suburban home on Maple Hill Road. The air was crisp, the streetlights buzzing faintly above, and the distant hum of traffic was the only reminder that the world was still awake somewhere else. Babysitting had become her main side gig, and tonight's job, watching over 8-year-old Lucas Barrett, was supposed to be an easy one. The Barrett's home was modern, filled with soft yellow lighting, abstract paintings, and the faint scent of lavender candles. Lucas had already been tucked into bed when she arrived, and Mrs. Barrett, a tired but kind woman, had left her a list of emergency numbers before heading out with her husband to a charity gala. Lucas might wake up once or twice, she'd said. He's been having bad dreams lately. Sophie smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, I've got him covered. Now, hours later, Sophie sat curled up on the couch with her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media while a storm began to whisper outside. The rain started light but soon turned into a steady rhythm against the windows. Thunder rolled softly, and every few flashes of lightning illuminated the room in pale, ghostly light. She was just about to text her roommate when the phone on the end table rang. Not her cell, the house phone. She hesitated, eyeing the old-fashioned cordless handset. The Barretts hadn't mentioned anyone calling. After the third ring, she picked it up. Hello. Silence. Then a faint, static-laced breath on the other end. Hello? She said again, frowning. The breathing stopped. Then a low voice whispered, Don't go upstairs. Her pulse spiked. Who is this? The line went dead. Sophie stood there for a long second, heart pounding in her chest. The logical part of her brain said it was a prank. Maybe the Barrett's landline had gotten a wrong number, or a telemarketer with a bad connection. But the voice, there was something about the way it said it, flat, emotionless, like a warning more than a threat. She tried to shake it off, grabbed her phone, and texted her roommate. Weird call on the landline. Sounded like a prank. Kind of creeped out, LOL. Then, from upstairs, she heard it. A faint thud, followed by a soft, dragging sound. Sophie froze. Lucas? She called out. No answer. She grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen counter and started up the stairs, each creak under her feet sounding too loud, too alive. When she reached the landing, she saw that Lucas's bedroom door was slightly open, a thin line of light spilling across the hall carpet. She knocked gently. Hey buddy, you okay? No reply. She pushed the door open. The bed was empty. The covers were rumpled, the nightlight glowing softly in the corner. Lucas! A faint shuffle came from the hallway behind her. She spun around, nothing there. Her breath quickened. Okay, She whispered to herself. Don't freak out. She moved down the hall, checking each door. Guest room, bathroom, storage, all empty. The last door at the end of the hall led to the attic. It was cracked open slightly, though she could have sworn it had been closed earlier. The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling across the sky like something growling in its sleep. Sophie's phone buzzed suddenly in her hand, startling her. She glanced down. Unknown number. You shouldn't have gone upstairs. Her heart skipped. Her throat went dry. She looked around the hallway, no one. She texted back. Who is this? Instantly, another message appeared. He's behind you. Sophie turned sharply, flashlight trembling. But the hall was empty. She ran into Lucas's room again, her breath quick and ragged. Lucas, if this is a game, it's not funny. Then she saw something that made her freeze. The closet door was open a few inches. Inside, she could hear breathing. Not the soft, even kind of a sleeping child, but slow, heavy, and deliberate. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Lucas! Silence. She reached out and pulled the door open in one motion. Empty. Just toys and hanging clothes swaying slightly, as if something had brushed past them. Her phone buzzed again. Get out of the house. This time, she didn't hesitate. She turned and ran for the stairs, but halfway down, the landline started ringing again. Ring, ring, ring. She ignored it, grabbed her car keys from the counter, and bolted for the front door. But when she twisted the knob, it didn't move. Locked. She tried again. Nothing. The ringing stopped. Then, from behind her, the voice came, soft and close, almost against her ear. You shouldn't have gone upstairs. Sophie screamed and spun around, but no one was there. Only the faint outline of muddy footprints leading from the hall toward the kitchen. She followed them slowly, her flashlight shaking. The prints stopped at the back door, which was wide open. Rain blew in through the opening, soaking the floor. Beyond the doorway, in the darkness, she could just barely make out the figure of a man standing in the yard. Still, watching. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. She looked down. He's not outside anymore. The flashlight flickered. She turned toward the living room and saw him. A tall, gaunt man in drenched clothes, standing in the corner, his face hidden in shadow. Sophie dropped the light, grabbed her phone, and ran to the upstairs bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. She pressed her back against it, shaking uncontrollably. She dialed 911. Please, someone's in the house. The Barrett residence on Maple Hill. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm but urgent. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Where are you now? I'm in the bathroom upstairs, she whispered. He's in the house. A long pause. Then the dispatcher said, Ma'am, get out of there. Now. Sophie frowned, confused. I can't. He's right outside. No. The dispatcher interrupted, voice trembling now. We just got a call from the Barretts. Their babysitter said someone was in the house. She was hiding in the bathroom. We've been on the phone with her for the last 5 minutes. Sophie's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I'm the babysitter. Before she could finish, something knocked gently on the bathroom door. 3 slow knocks. She dropped the phone, backing away as the handle began to turn. Hello? Came a whisper, but it wasn't a man's voice. It was a child's. Miss Sophie. He said you shouldn't have gone upstairs. The door creaked open, the light flickered, and then silence. When the police arrived minutes later, the house was empty. The Barrett's car sat in the driveway, untouched. The front door was locked from the inside. Upstairs, they found the bathroom door ajar, a phone lying on the floor, its screen cracked, the call still connected. The dispatcher replayed the last seconds of the recording later that night. Static. Then a faint voice, distant, almost childlike, whispered through the line. She went upstairs, and beneath it, quieter, another voice. Low, male, whispering from somewhere close. Now she stays. Rain lashed hard against the windows that night, drumming on the glass like 1,000 restless fingers. Jenna Price, 22, had just put the baby to sleep. A tiny, pale boy named Eli, and sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, with the baby monitor resting beside her. The soft sound of Eli's steady breathing filled the small, cozy living room, a comforting white noise against the storm outside. The parents had left for a weekend trip to the mountains, leaving Jenna in charge of their rural farmhouse tucked deep in the woods. It was her third night there. The first two had been quiet, peaceful even, but tonight, something about the air felt heavier. The thunder seemed to roll a little too long. The wind whispered through the trees like a voice trying to form words. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the old black-and-white movie flickering on TV. The monitor crackled softly on the end table beside her, one of those models with a small video screen and a grainy night vision feed. Eli's tiny crib was visible in the corner of the frame, unmoving except for the gentle rise and fall of his chest. But then, for a moment, the static jumped. The image flickered. Eli wasn't alone. Jenna blinked. For less than a second, she thought she saw something standing near the crib. A shape tall and bent, almost human but wrong somehow. She sat up straight, heart hammering. The image cleared. Eli was alone again. She exhaled shakily and forced a laugh. Great. Ghosts on the baby cam. Classic. But something about it lingered. She rewound the monitor's feed only a few seconds back, and there it was again. Just a faint blur beside the crib, shaped like a person leaning over the baby. She swallowed hard. It's just interference, she muttered. Lightning, static, whatever. Still, she turned up the brightness on the monitor and watched. Eli slept peacefully. The storm raged. Then came the sound. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Not from the window, not from the rain. It was faint, distant, like fingernails brushing against wood. She muted the TV, straining her ears. The tapping continued, slow, deliberate, from somewhere upstairs. Her pulse quickened. She glanced at the monitor again. Eli was still asleep. She grabbed her flashlight and tiptoed toward the staircase. The house was dim, the power flickering from the storm. Each step creaked under her weight, echoing like whispers through the hall. As she reached the top, she froze. The nursery door, which she had definitely closed earlier, now stood slightly open. Eli? She whispered, though she knew he couldn't answer. She pushed the door open slowly. The crib stood in its place, the baby still asleep. The curtains swayed from the draft of the open window. She crossed the room quickly, shut the window, and tucked the blanket around the sleeping child. Everything seemed normal again, until she noticed the floor beneath the crib. There were footprints. Wet, muddy footprints, too large to be hers, too heavy to belong to anyone else. They led from the window to the crib, then back toward the closet. Jenna's stomach dropped. The closet door was closed. She stared at it, her breath shallow, flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. "Hello?" she whispered. "If someone's in there, I'm calling the police." Silence. Then, from the baby monitor still downstairs, came a whisper. Faint, distant, childlike. "Don't look in the closet." Jenna froze. The monitor wasn't supposed to transmit voices to her, only from the nursery. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket, nearly making her jump. She fumbled it out, an unknown number. She answered in a whisper. "Hello." Static filled the line, then a faint voice, her own voice. "Don't look in the closet." Her hands went cold. "Who is this?" The line went dead. Jenna turned back toward the closet. The knob moved, just slightly, a soft creak, and the door opened a few inches. Her flashlight beam caught the edge of something, the hem of a dark coat, a pale hand gripping the wood. She stumbled back, gasping. "I'm calling the cops." She bolted downstairs, nearly tripping over the steps.